this is the monthly forum for the month of July. Thank you for your patience. If you can, like, share, and those things help us to get more people to dial in. It moves algorithms too. And so I'll go straight to, the things that we like to cover up front is kind of where we were at and where we've been, but I'll quickly go draw your attention to August the 11th special election. If you vote for, I'll get to it when we get to another slide, but then again, everything here highlighted red that we see of pertinent information to share. And then we do have a pre-election campaign marketing launch that's coming up that I think that's really exciting for not only for us, for those that are looking for more content and information based on some targeted areas that we plan to reach by November the 3rd. If you want to know more about me personally and how I got here, I would ask that you go to YouTube to subscribe, but also there are other forums that kind of show how I got to this point in running for State Senate District 21. The data analysis part, we just always monitor this, but I do anticipate again that our Tuscaloosa numbers, if we're looking on the left side where Facebook, our primary platform, that we expect that to be around 50% of our audience before we get to November the 3rd. We think that we're all trending in different places in different ways in the right spaces, but we look across all these different metrics from our shopping website to the website itself, and then just the other social media platforms that you see listed. The highlighted topics that we wanted to cover for this month, what we always like to do is to take the topics that are discussed the most and that are relevant to Senate District 21. If it's federal, international politics, if it's things that are outside the realms of Senate District 21, although I am aware of those issues, those potential policy concerns that aren't specific to Senate District 21 or the state legislature, and that's kind of on the inside. And I answer those questions in these type forums, but also when I'm out and engaging and we're talking to folks about the campaign and they ask questions when I respond to those. I don't feel the need to speak on those issues and post on those issues every time that something's occurring. While I'm here, I do want to pause and take a privilege to pause to remember our service members. I think that number now is three that are KIA as of the result of the engagement in the Middle East. There were two, and I think that there's another one that's today that may not be specific to an incident by enemy activity, but there are three now within the last couple of days that have transitioned from life fighting and defending our country. So I do ask that you all keep our servicemen and women in your prayers. Back to highlighted areas. So the first topic that we have is data centers, and so what one of our candidates for governor, Senator Tommy Tuberville, the people say different ways, but he said that we're gonna do data centers. That's quoting what he said. We're going to do data centers. But he said, and I agree with what he said. It's already left the station. If you look on the right side, big tech political spending was 1.1 billion in 2024. And that money is going directly to the candidates that are running for office. 1.1 billion in 2024's presidential election, and the candidates that are running for governor, state senate, all across the nation, all you have to do is follow the money. I attribute this to a decision by the Supreme Court to allow unlimited money in politics. So the people don't decide whether we're going to do these things. The person that the most money is donated to that supports big tech decides that we're going to do these things. But ultimately, the power is still with each individual voter. collectively, but each individual voter deciding that if if we're going to go with proliferation of data centers, I'm not voting for that candidate. Then it's the people's voice and not the unlimited amount of money that's put into politics. If you look at where that money went to in 2024, that red indicates to conservative politicians in the top 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Seven, 8 out of the top 10 went to conservative donors, to conservative politicians to influence elections. Now, personally, I don't look at this as a Republican or a Democratic issue. I look at it as a Democratic Republic issue. If Democrats were in power, people with the most money would give Democrats money too. So again, so that's kind of how we got here. And what I've mentioned before is how do we get to this place? And I always look at it like an upside down triangle. We have big business and lobbyists on one side, most politicians on the other side, and 90% of America on the other side. So when big business is allowed to put an unlimited amount of money into the pockets of politicians, then who do the politicians ultimately make decisions to help benefit? And if you go back to a previous forum, I talked specifically about how state legislators have levers to influence lowering the cost of living. And so I would encourage you to go back, or I could probably pin that reel and show that at a later time. But again, the issue with data centers and how that train's already left the station because the money is already in the coffers for politicians to allow policy, to allow friendly policy for big tech. Some of the concerns for data centers that we should all be concerned about is specific to cost of electricity and the massive amount of water that data centers need to operate. Um, if you always say that if you have to look at what's going on in other places, and if you look at places like China, what they've decided to do with data centers is, in some cases, they've moved them underwater to make them 30% cooler. If that 30% cooler is less energy that they're using. And oh, by the way, they're also using renewable energy to decrease the cost of energy. So now, what does that mean for Alabama? Alabama Power said we're going to freeze rates for 2 years. If data centers are going to come in, it's going to increase the demand for electricity. And if the demand for electricity increases, the cost of electricity is going to increase. So when it's time after that 2 year mark for Alabama Power in where they are at rates, do you think they're going to lower rates or increase rates? My argument as your legislator for Senate District 21 that we should be lowering rates if the profits for Alabama Power is in the billions. Not to have to do with line workers and poll workers and those people that are on the front lines working for Alabama Power, but I'm talking about corporate and stockholders. If the revenue gains is already in the billions, we shouldn't be holding rates. We should be decreasing rates. So number one issue is the amount of electricity that they require. Two is the amount of water that they require. And if you live where I live, we know that we already have water issues. Other one is air pollution. With air pollution, these systems also require backup energy. What's that? That's diesel generators. What do diesel generators? They produce pollution in the air. That's that's diesel. That's pollution in the air. And the other one is the amount of noise, constant noise that they cause. Think about when you used to have the old computers and they made a little noise. Well, data centers make a noise too. This that you're able to hear. They also require light 24 hours, which they run all night. So there's wildlife that's impacted. There's noise levels if they're built in and around communities that are impacted. And so while we say we're in, and so the fifth one is the economic piece of it too. So one, the immediate investment is in construction. They don't really require people to maintain them other than maintenance and repair. So if it's 5 billion coming in, that money's not going into workers that'll be working in those facilities every day. And then one of the responses that I heard was that that money's going to come back in tax revenues. If you look at the people that are profiting from big tech, one, they already not paying taxes in the first place. It's an insult. Some of them are paying no taxes at all already. And then the land requirement for these big facilities, and one facility is shown here. So I do know for District 21 that there's a plan for one right now that's in Brookwood, and that meeting for that facility is coming up, I think, at the beginning of August. And so what, Jody? What do you do as an advocate if we elect you? One, we're demanding transparency, that there are no non-disclosure agreements, and we want legislation to ensure that our private information isn't being stolen and stored and sold. And then we want to ensure that data centers are one. I'm pro data centers, and I'm pro transparency for data centers, and I'm pro legislation to make sure our information is not being stolen and taken and used and sold. And I'm also for ensuring that we have data centers in locations that aren't around schools, that aren't around residential neighborhoods. This kind of sounds like the dumping that happened years ago from up north to dump down south. So that's my position on data centers. I'm pro data centers, but we also want to do it in a way that the people have a voice, and we do this in a way that takes um, energy consumption into consideration, water utilization into consideration, and also legislation to ensure that there's privacy of our information. I'll go, but you can be thinking and generating if there are any questions as it pertains to data centers. And then next up is special elections and how we got here. Legislature, Supreme Court made a decision. This is the House, the U.S. House district, the congressional districts for the House. Decision was made. Let me go back. Not just for the House of Representatives, but also for the state Senate. Senate districts 25, 26, that's in the Montgomery area, but then also primarily impact for us in Senate District 21 is Congressional District 7, which is Congresswoman Terry Sewell is currently the incumbent for that office. So that special election is on August the 11th. Special special primary election on August the 11th. The two candidates that are on the ballot, Amy Akin, a doctorate in education, lifelong educator. As far as what I was able to do research on, I had to Google. You can see the spaces. Alabama Gazette is one place where I found information on what her principles and priorities are, and then the other place was 1819. They call it news, but 1819 news is the social media site. And then David Perry is an ordained licensed minister from Selma, Alabama, and he was involved in a program that helps at-risk children for quite some time and has done a lot of work in that area. So if you vote Republican, you need to be at the ballots on August the 11th. We've had some of historic low turnout for. Um, I always go back to 2024 presidential election was the lowest turnout in 30 years. The lowest turnout in 30 years presidential election in 2024. So what does that mean is we had 1.5 to 1.7 million people that were registered to vote in Alabama that did not vote at all. President Trump received 1.45 million votes in Alabama, and there were 1.5 to 1.7 million people that were registered that just did not vote at all in Alabama. So I would encourage, if you vote Republican, to be at the ballots on August the 11th. And that's all that I think that I have on that. The next topic that we have is the housing affordability crisis. And this kind of came on my radar because a close friend of the campaign and one of our champions of the ground crews daughters is looking for residents, and so I started doing some research, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is much bigger than I even that I knew about. And so if you look, just kind of going through the data, this is the Realtors Association information that household incomes earning $75,000 a year can only afford less than a quarter of the for sale houses on the market. The housing market would need 367 US wide, 367,000 homes at a maximum of $170,000 just to reach demand. And we have those other numbers, and I always kind of go to other numbers also, that in one decade grocery prices has increased 36%. Insurance premiums has increased by 60%. The cost of a car, I think the average cost of a new car now is like $50,000 in the U.S. And so how we approach this crisis, I always kind of go back to livable wage jobs. And so if there aren't livable wage jobs, then that helps to create the crisis. Another really important factor that helps to increase the crisis is the U.S. debt. We're at over 39 trillion now. I'm really conservative on how the U.S. should be spending federal government money, regardless of who the president is. And so we've seen an attention and focus on that in previous years, but that debt is steady climbing, and that has the most influence on the value of the dollar. So in 1990, if you had $100,000 in 1990, right now you would need $325,000 to have $100,000 in 1990. So now we've gone from the average age from first time home buyers being 29 years old to now the average age of first time home buyers is 40 years old. And what a lot of people in places that I talk to, I say, no, the first place to accumulate wealth is in home ownership. And so in the 60s, we had the fair housing. We had different policies to allow for for lower and middle class families to buy homes. Now we just passed legislation federally to help with this problem, and I owe another follow-up session to kind of go through. There were 50 different provisions in the bill, and many of y'all know I worked on Capitol Hill, so I'm used to reading through bills, but I need to read through the bill to see what's in it, to see what's the so what and how that impacts us at the state level. There are other, block grants is some of the things that we look at. Um, Subsidized loans is another issue, another area that we look at on how we can help first time home buyers. But again, if $100,000 in 1990, you would need $325,000 today, it still makes it extremely difficult to purchase a home. And so if we transition to the right side of this slide, living in Alabama, to live comfortably in Alabama, single person, single adult, $85,000 a year is what you would need to make. For a family of four, almost $200,000 a year. And if you look at the rankings, that's 47th in the nation. So again, that leads to 1/3 of adults between 18 and 34 that are living with parents. Average age for home buyers now 40 years old. So one is really not just saying that we're conservative and have concern for the U.S. debt and the amount of money that we're spending, but it's actually to actually implement policies and actions at the federal level and state level to lower the debt for the United States. That's, I say, is at the heart of the crisis. And I owe the audience here more information on the federal policy that was enacted, the bipartisan legislation, and the president said it wasn't a priority for him, so it just was enacted without his signature after a certain amount of time. I don't know the exact number of days. I should, but I don't. But anyway, it was enacted without his signature. But I need to go through all of that legislation and see how that translates to federal programs and federal dollars. If there are any questions, then now would be the time um, to start prefacing those questions. Um, we are at this point, for the month of July and engagements, the month of June, you can see all the engagements and different activities that the campaign was involved in. We have promotional items, and we have, I think we're at a good place with all of the promotional items, but then we do have the one product that people had asked questions about is the anniversary of the 25th birthday of the United States. We have had these limited amount of shirts made, and people have asked about those red campaign shirts, and so we are taking pre-orders for those. The cost of $20, and we will want those by the 20th of July. And I do think that we will still have some kind of initiative to give a few of those shirts away as well. Yeah, yeah, the 250th anniversary of the United States, and we do plan on a program to give away a few of those shirts. I think that's what we're going to do as of right now. So we always end with thanking the ground crew for their support, um, from left to right. The gentleman on the left, I won't mention his name, but he came up to me and he said, "Hey, my son has a T-shirt, and I need one too." And so we had a conversation. My question is always, what are what's the most important issue, concern that you have? And as we start this dialogue, I connect their concern with my position. Their concern, because again, across the spectrum from Lakeview down to Duncanville, all the way to Macshan, Palmetto, Forest, issues range from place to place on what primary concerns are. And one of the concerns that's across the board is utility rates. And what I've mentioned with utility rates specifically is what we decided to do with this campaign, and what I've said, we're not going to take money from big business and corporation. Not that we don't want to advocate for small business, big business, but we felt it was important to represent you, to ensure that we don't take money from big business, so that we don't become so that we're able to balance the advocacy that we have for everyday folks from Senate District 21 and businesses as well. Anyway, so Mr. Latham in the middle, near the middle, and from Reform was, we had a nice conversation about his issues and concerns. And then my friend now lives in near the University Mall area, had committed to helping us out a lot in the University Mall area, which is one of the areas that we're really, really focused on. So we're thankful for my friend Jennifer's efforts there. And then one picture from another event. But again, without the ground crew, we don't go anywhere. Extremely grateful and thankful for everybody in your specific contributions. What we're looking for, as members of the ground crew, based on the area that you live in, your polling location, we need folks that will, hey, let's go door to door in your neighborhood, and I'm coming. Regardless of whether we make these agreements, I'm coming. So maybe your door, But door to door, hey, this is who I am. Make sure that we put a face with a name and let people know. The most valuable trait that you can have in running the campaign and just in life in general is to just care about people. Um, Once people know that you have a genuine concern from what they're concerned about, this is from leadership 101 with the military, is that you care about people. In the military, we never leave a fallen comrade, is what we say. So I'm not leaving any folks from Senate District 21 behind. Anyway, so that's why we made the agreement that we're not taking money from big businesses. That has an impact on how we campaign, the method and modes, and also allows us to be efficient in how we campaign. So again, thank you for everybody, members of the ground crew, for everybody that's tuned in. Extremely grateful. We normally sometimes we do post our events and activities, and then sometimes we don't. It just kind of really depends. And what we do is based on who the folks that have signed up to be members of the ground crew. If there's an event in your area, I'm definitely reaching out. And then before there's a scheduled event that I'm lined up to have an active role in, we post information on that event. And we do these things for a reason. So again, if you do want to if you want more information on exactly where we're going to be at for the month of July, you can call me personally. But this is public space, and there are all kinds of people across the spectrum that don't necessarily believe in the politics of just running a good campaign. So we don't publish the full listing well in advance, and it's specific for a reason. If there are any questions, we're more than happy to take questions. I can see the comments online. Um, So I'll pause to see if there are any questions about data centers specifically, or the August the 11th. I'm thinking about November the 3rd. If there are any questions about August the 11th, or if there are any questions about the housing crisis. So if not, what I will close with is that everywhere that I go, I tell people that Senate District 21 in this race is the most competitive state Senate race in Alabama. That we're running the most efficient campaign for state Senate in the state of Alabama. People that know me and have known me all of my life know that are not surprised that we are here. And everything that we look at for metrics and measurements and checks on the perspectives of us having a historic win on November the 3rd, everything's saying check, 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 check. And they say, well, Jody, how do you think you're going to win? I said, we're going to have more votes than the other candidate in the race. It's that simple. I looked them in their eyes. I said, we're going to have more votes than the other candidate in the race. We're grateful for all of the support that we have in Pickens County. We're grateful for the support that we have in Lakeview. We're thankful for the support that we have in Abernathy. I won't go all across the board, but now we're focused on Tuscaloosa and Northport. Nothing's changed on our platform, but it was strategic for us to run a race with the end state in mind. And how do we get there? We're running an efficient campaign when we know that we're only going to get $25 and $50 donations, when the other candidate that's running against me was going to get 5,000, 2,500, all across the board. That we were going to be out fundraised by thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And we have the most competitive race in the state of Alabama. And I have no doubt that on November the 3rd, that news stations that have counted us out, that ignore us, the people that ignore us, that we'll welcome them with open arms on November the 3rd. Thank you again for tuning in. I didn't see any questions, so thank you for your patience with the slide deck. We when one device went out, I had to go into to secondary mode. So I thank you again for your time and for your patience and for everybody that has tuned in. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you all out and on the campaign trail. Um, just like I would say when I end any remarks and everywhere I go, I love you. I love everybody, whether you support this campaign or not. I love everybody, and there's really nothing that anybody can do to change my perspective, my moral and ethical values, and how we plan to run this race with endurance until the end. Y'all have a great rest of your Sunday evening, and I thank you again for tuning in.